As of 2020, 1 in 36 8-year-old children have autism spectrum disorder in the United States. In specifically California, 1 in 22 8-year-old children have autism spectrum disorder. What is autism spectrum disorder, also known as ASD? ASD is a developmental disorder that is said to have two core symptoms: impaired social interaction and repetitive behavior. Though there are core behaviors, no one child exhibits the same behaviors or degree of behaviors. Alongside each child, no family faces the same experiences when raising a child with ASD due to varying influences. In the last few years, the prevalence of ASD in minority communities have steadily increased, being attributed to increased educational resources and diagnosis services. Though there has been an increase in prevalence, there is a lack of research on how different socioeconomic and ethnic communities are affected. Studies have been carried out in North America, Western Europe, East Asia, South Asia, and the Middle East. No matter the place or family, culture heavily shapes the experiences and perceptions of family. It is important to continue engaging with communities of various backgrounds. My name is Jennifer Nguyen, and this is my honors research project. It takes a village: the importance of community for immigrant Vietnamese families raising children with autism spectrum disorder. After the Vietnam War in 1976, Vietnamese refugees immigrated to the United States and other countries in hopes of beginning a new life. Vietnamese citizens continued to immigrate for the last 40 years, finding new homes where they kickstarted their new education, began their careers, and created their families. So what do you do as a Vietnamese immigrant when you move to a new country and start a new family? How do you support yourself and your child that has a neurodevelopmental disorder that your very own country hasn't truly recognized? Immigrant Vietnamese families in America answer these questions by gathering in their physical community spaces, where they find comfort despite the fact that there is perceived stigma. 10 first-generation immigrant families from San Jose and Garden Grove, California participated in semi-structured interviews over calls where they answered open-ended questions in either Vietnamese or English. They reside in cities with large Vietnamese populations, living minutes away from their city's very own Little Saigon. The participants included 7 mothers and 6 siblings who watched their parents raise their autistic sibling. The children on the spectrum were between 15 and 28 years old, and for the purposes of this project, first-generation immigrant families specifically referred to Vietnamese families with parents who immigrated to America after the Vietnam War. Though I had hoped to recruit families from local organizations that serve children on the spectrum, interviewees were found through personal connections, online postings, and mainly snowballing. For the rest of this video, I will make use of identity-first language in light of the language preferences of the ASD community. Mothers were made aware of their autistic children's different behaviors through their children's teachers, pediatricians, or even by their own observations. Regardless of what initially caught their attention, all the mothers eventually found themselves at their local regional center, a site contracted by the state of California to coordinate lifelong services for individuals with developmental disabilities and their families. Here, the families received a diagnosis and access to available services. When discussing this process, mothers emphasized their confusion and frustrations. I used broken English to tell the pediatrician what was wrong, and the pediatrician responded in English. I was only able to pick up a few words. It was hard to understand why our son was like this. I did not understand. The diagnosis was difficult to grasp, let alone the process of receiving it and understanding the next steps. There are various barriers like language and cultural differences that interfere with the quality of care and understanding of those seeking medical support in America as immigrants. Even after the diagnosis, all mothers hope that their child would catch up with other children or eventually become normal, denying the autistic children's realities. Mothers experienced grief and fear for the loss of normality for their child. They had uncertainties for the future regarding their child's education and their family life. How do I take care of my child? Who do I go to? What does this mean? What do they need? Will they be able to have support at school? In the present day, the mothers still had uncertainties and questions about the future. One mother asked me, what should I do now that he is older? Another family unit all individually asked, what will happen when I, my mom, my auntie passes away? Will I, my family, have to take on the care? Parents of autistic children are reported with significantly more parenting stress symptoms, such as negative parental self-views and experiences of difficult child behaviors after the initial diagnosis. However, the Vietnamese culture can add a layer to this reality. In the Vietnamese culture, children have a set of societal expectations following the cultural values of Confucianism. They are expected to create a life for themselves and eventually care for their elders. For these families, having an autistic child meant an uncertain future that goes against these expectations, playing a role in stigma that could cause stress. Stigma could be generalized as society's negative evaluation of a particular feature or behavior of an individual. These caretakers spoke of their fears of judgment and stigma from their friends, neighbors, and strangers because of what may be perceived. One older sister who took on the role of a mother after immigrating stated that her sister has autism because of how she might have been mistreated when they were younger. A mother said, maybe I did something in my past life or before my child was born to cause a disorder. The idea that parents could have done something differently or might have done something wrong to cause their child's fate is echoed by the mothers. Both beliefs put responsibilities onto the caretaker and their actions, contributing to the stigmatizing beliefs and parental stress. A similar occurrence is seen in the United States with the theory of the refrigerator mom. These beliefs are prevalent even though the caretakers recognize that ASD is caused by biology and genetics that causes differences in the brain. However, stigma was more than just a parent's fear of judgment. Cultural stigma was present in social interactions. My sibling's diagnosis was never talked about growing up. Oh, no one talks about the diagnosis. Everyone knew, but their diagnosis was just not talked about. Parents tiptoed around the idea of their autistic siblings and simply said that they were different. When it was acknowledged, comments would come in the form of sympathy or pity. Our grandma, uncles, aunts would say, "Poor Brandon, poor my mom, poor my aunt." The lack of discussion and the perceptions of both parents and others about themselves and autism created a feeling of estrangement, as they had all these questions but no social support to turn to. After receiving their child's diagnoses, all of these caretakers developed coping strategies to combat parental stress. Coping refers to the ability to manage and deal with internal and external demands in stressful situations. All the parents went through phases seen in Southeast Asian families in San Jose with children under 10 years old, including but not limited to denial, empowerment, spirituality, withdrawal, and acceptance. However, even 20 to 30 years later after the initial diagnosis, these mothers continued to cope through community places. These mothers found themselves at local parks where they and their child interact with elders, other children, and autism programs on a weekly basis. The grandpas and grandmas who walk at the park in the morning are extremely kind. They treat my son as their own. They talk to him and ask him questions like he is a normal child. They even exercise with him. It is fun. My sister loves walks and it makes her happy. It is good that I also get fresh air. Sometimes a program for autistic kids come, she gets to play with them and is welcomed. I can feel at ease. They found themselves attending their weekly religious congregations, whether that be Buddhist temples or Catholic church, where they and their child are encouraged to contribute to the events, participate in prayers, and build relationships with others. The monks know my son. We come every weekend for food service and prayers. The monks let my son help. I get to pray and talk to others, knowing my son is trusted and allowed to share the same place. Alongside that, they found themselves in everyday spaces such as schools with other immigrant Vietnamese women who speak the same language, have the same culture, and most importantly, is raising an autistic child. Outside of my son's class, it is a special education program, I met my friend. It was easy to talk to her because we both speak Vietnamese. It was so easy. Being Vietnamese and talking to other Vietnamese mothers is easy. Our children are the same, we understand each other. All these spaces were physical locations that these mothers found themselves in because of their schedule. Eventually, these mothers developed a sense of place, a concept of subjective perceptions on and emotions to their environment through interactions of all environmental aspects. They felt welcomed, cared for, and understood. These spaces were given meaning as these mothers intertwined their culture, feelings, and experiences and associated them to these spaces. Their sense of place extends past their belief that their cultural community may have stigma towards their child's diagnosis, allowing them to feel comfortable weaving these places and relationships into their everyday lives to cope and for support. Engaging with families of an immigrant Vietnamese background reveals the ways that culture can impact the experiences of families raising autistic children. Through acknowledging the cultural needs of this specific community, appropriate resources could be developed. An example would be Vietnamese family centers that create a welcoming place for families who feel ostracized. It could amplify and normalize the realities of having an autistic child through creating a place that allows families to share their experience and knowledge. Thank you for listening to the snippets of these families' lives. I hope this project provided a new understanding of the importance of culture for familial experiences.